Welcome to the Home Yoga Practice Source podcast. We are glad you are here. Here, where yoga is practice and practice is everything. I'm Christine, founder of Healing Yoga and the Home Yoga Practice Workshop, but most of all, longtime home yoga practitioner. I'm a yoga guide, and today I will be talking once more with Sonia Masocco, who is the founder and owner of Phytotherapy, both online and in person here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's a qualified practitioner of clinical aromatherapy, reflexology, and massage therapy, herbology, and Ayurveda. And after teaching for close to 10 years at her alma mater, the Ayurvedic Institute and the University of New Mexico, she currently teaches worldwide, mentors new and upcoming practitioners, and facilitates product development in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome, Sonia. I am glad you are here.
Thank you for having me again. I love our interviews, so I'm happy to share whatever I can with your listeners.
I'm so glad that you're here. It's always a treat to talk with you. And I wanted to situate our discussion in terms of the Ayurvedic respect for circadian and seasonal rhythms. One way of looking at Ayurvedic science and practice is that it really is a practice of cooperating with our circadian and seasonal biology, because they really are, you don't have one without the other. And in Western science, the 2017 Nobel Prize for Medicine and/or Biology was given to a team that discovered and published about the first part of the human circadian rhythm mechanism, how our bodies actually tune in to sunlight, to heat, and to moisture conditions, and how that shifts our biochemistry. And I think that this is so exciting because it's an example of the convergence of Western and Eastern thought. And it urges us to really look once more at the wisdom of the Eastern traditions, Ayurveda in particular, to inform our daily practices. And we're filming this in early November, just after the Celtic festival of essentially a new year, All Hallows Eve, when they say the veil is thin. And I often think of the seasonal transitions, and we're nearing the seasonal transition between autumn and early winter, as the veil is thin between consciousness and matter, between our bodies and minds. And that gives us just such a beautiful opportunity to affect how we live and feel in the world. I'm wondering, have you noticed with the recent seasonal shifts a desire or an urge to shift your home practice?
So in Ayurveda, there's the knowledge that we need to align ourselves to nature, and that is not only a daily practice, but it's also a seasonal practice. So we have what is called a dinacharya, which is our daily practice, and then we have a rutucharya, which is really the seasonal practice. And then we always have to go back to these 5 elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. And we always will say that when there is a shift in season, this is in Ayurveda considered a vata time. So your ether and air are elevated. With that comes like that subtlety, that clarity, that understanding. But there's also the dryness and the cold factor, and there's the mobile quality. So because of those qualities that get exacerbated, we need to work with opposites to balance that. So you'll have a prevailing cold quality that is only going to get worse as the season continues, because we're going into winter. So that's when we will prefer to do more warming practices, either in yoga or in pranayama, or even when we're having our tea or when we're having our foods. Everything is going to be a little bit more warming and kindling our personal fire, because it's really getting debilitated and weak, and it has already gotten debilitated by the summer. So according to Ayurveda, during the summer, that external heat really debilitates the body. And so now in the winter is eventually going to be the time to restore. But if we are off balance, it's going to be very difficult to restore because we won't have that good absorption. So we really need to be careful of how to kindle this fire. That way we can actually have proper absorption and kind of plump ourselves up basically for the winter, basically bulk up, because basically that's also a time where you're going to need more immunity. And according to Ayurveda, kapha, so in the same way that prana is the content of vata, ojas, which is our immunity, is the content of kapha. And so if you have good enough kapha, you'll have good enough immunity. If you have none, you're going to be susceptible to everything that's out there. So you have to change your practice accordingly. That way you're not depleting any of your tissues or any of your doshas. So yes, you have to take care of yourself. And it's in your daily practice, but also in the seasonal practice.
I love that. I uh, I've been shifting my practice, both asana, pranayama, as well as the meditative practices for the winter. And I find this to be one of the most difficult seasonal transitions because of that cold factor. And it is so cozy and warm in bed in the morning. Are you finding, or how do you work? How do you dance with that if that's an obstacle for you?
Well, I have I call it the gift. It's like it's always a gift, in my opinion. And we have a wood burning stove. And so
Yeah.
I I am the fire keeper. And I need to be the fire. First of all, I wake up earlier than my husband. So I wake up between 4 and 6. But I would say 4:35 is really my wake up time. And I turn on the fire. So it's like it's although they say kapha and I'm kapha like to be cozy and stay in bed, I actually in the morning I'm an early riser and I like to be up, awake, and do my practices. And it's also because he sleeps until late, this is my perfect time to be alone and have my own time. So, lighting a fire, observing the fire, meditating on the fire, and then the house is cold. So doing sun salutation and vinyasa is actually helpful for me. So this is this is perfect, so for me it's like move salutations out the window. Maybe that was okay during the summer, but right now it's sun salutations, and basically doing that then I get warm, and it's like it's not even a matter of the fire anymore. It's just I'm physiologically moving, so this is good.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And then we actually heat, well, ours is a pellet stove instead of a wood stove.
Mhm.
Um, but it's nurturing to have a literal fire, well insulated and all the other things, of course. But for people who don't have that in their homes, um, do you ever recommend practices of gazing at a candle flame, for instance, or an imaginary fire?
Well, yeah, so Trataka I find is really helpful. So
Mhm.
typically this is done by putting the candle arm length away without a flickering flame and observing the candle. But realistically, not everybody's going to have a ghee lamp. So for me, it doesn't matter what candle you use, it doesn't have to be ghee. But the idea behind it, if we are looking at the Shivananda school of yoga and the Bihar school of yoga, is that you're not only increasing, so light increases light, and like increases like. So if you have a fire, it's going to be aggravated or increased by the fire of that, either lamp or candle. But actually, in a cold season, this is a good practice. But it only is not only going to trigger your internal fire, but it's also going to burn things that are in your auric field. So if there is confusion, or if there is grogginess, or if there is heaviness of any kind, or if there is toxicity, this light is actually going to help burn some of those seeds of toxicity. So it's a good practice, either in the season, but also in any time that we feel a little bit heavy, dense, dull, sticky, when we feel that we're not at our best. Actually, observing a small candle fire is good. Typically, we like to do that in the early morning when there's no light outside, or later in the evening when there is no light outside, because according to the Ayurvedic thought, observing a light is debilitating to the eyes. So we don't want to actually do that when then there's going to be the sun up, or if we're going to be, watching TV or reading stuff on the computer. That's like not a good idea. But if we at least leave half an hour in between that, then we can go ahead and do that. But definitely using a candle is really a good thing. Even if it's not a big fire, it will ignite the fire with it.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I want to transition to an area of particular interest and expertise for you. Yeah, our plant allies, teas, oils, and culinary herbs. Are are there shifts that you make or recommend in teas for the early winter season or for the Ritusandi?
So in Ayurveda, when we're looking at any substance that we ingest, there's going to be either a cooling virya, which is a potency,
Mhm.
or a heating potency. So, we in the summer, we're looking for things that are cooling. So we're looking at mint tea or hibiscus or rose or lavender, or we're using spices that are going to be a little bit more cooling, maybe on the fennel side, or even using more cardamom. But now, or even a clove. But now that we're moving towards the fall and the winter, here we're supposed to be using spices that are going to be a little bit hotter. So
Mhm.
here's where we're going to be using the long pepper, the black pepper, the ginger, the mustard seeds. We're going to kind of spice foods up, but we're also going to cook them. We're not going to be favoring things that are raw, because things that are raw are considered rough and dry and cold. And so we don't want any of that. So we're going to have soups and stews and basically teas and and things that are going to be well cooked. And if we do, Ayurveda is not in big favor of having a lot of dairy during the winter or even spring, because that's actually considered cold, dense, and heavy. And so, in order to have that, you need to spice it up. So, if you're going to have milk, you need to be putting some pepper in there, or ginger, or cinnamon, or basically spice it up and have it hot. You should not be drinking any of these things cold. You should not be having any type of cold yogurt. You should definitely not have cheese, especially after sundown, because these things are going to actually create obstruction. So they're going to obstruct the airways, they're going to obstruct the absorption. So basically, this is not going to be good for your overall health in as the season progresses.
And in terms of immunity and to connect it to things that might be very familiar for people who are just discovering Ayurveda
Yeah.
and the lifestyle. It's mucus, right?
Yes, and we don't want any of it in any way, shape, or form. And so, if you have a choice between having a cream of mushroom soup or a minestrone, you want to have the minestrone, because you don't want a cream of anything, because that's thick and so is mucus. And so you want something that is thin, or kind of, it's cooked and lighter, in essence, and more easily digestible, and it doesn't have that dairy quality in there.
Mhm.
So according to Ayurveda, we have to be very careful with the amount of dairy that we have in the season because we really don't want to aggravate the mucus. So we could have dairy on a sunny day, but not on a cloudy or rainy day. And that means we're not having cheese on a rainy or cloudy day unless there's a lot of pepper. So you can have a goat cheese that's covered with pepper and spices. That's going to be okay. Or if you get an old cheese that's going to be with pepper inside of it, that's okay. Or you're going to drink some wine or something sharp that can cut through that mucus quality, then that's okay. But realistically, cheese and bread is not an option, especially during this season.
Particularly if you're tending any
Respiratory, cough, congested, cold type of thing. Absolutely not. Yes.
absolutely. And so people might be interested. I know many of my clients will be interested that moving into winter is when Ayurveda recommends if you're going to drink some wine. This is the best time.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
yes, go ahead.
This is the best time. And actually, Ayurveda will say almost better red than white. Um,
Always for me.
Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but in India, there's like a whole series of medicines that are considered asavas and aristas, which are alcoholic fermented preparations. So they're wines, they're medicinal wines. And people are supposed to be taking these little wines like 4 ounces 3 times a day or something. It's like, it's pretty intense. And with water, maybe to dilute it a little bit, but some people take it also without the water piece. These are self-fermenting alcohols and or wines, and there's like a laundry list of them, and they're very helpful. And typically, you're doing this type of practice in the winter and the spring. This is when you should be using these type of products. But otherwise, if you don't have that, people would say you can, or if you have, there are a lot of people that have had abuse of alcohol, and they still need the heating factor. We would say, well, have some tulsi tea, so the holy basil tea or ginger tea will also have that sharp cutting principle, so that can be used easily. Or pickled ginger, that can be easily used, like the one you find at sushi stores, or when you,
Tremendously.
yeah,
Yes.
it's wonderful. And so you can actually buy those in jars in Oriental stores, and you can actually keep it in the fridge. And that's something that would actually help relieve congestion. So if you feel that you're a little bit congested, you could just go to the fridge and get a little bit of your ginger. And if you don't want to use the pickled ginger, then you can get even the candied ginger. There's like so many options for different people, but we definitely like ginger and holy basil. This is the season.
This is the season for the Tulsi.
Yes. And then
That's
there's also the season for the turmeric. This is the season. So, a lot of people were drinking turmeric in the summer, and I was like, why? It's true that everybody's, talking about golden milk, but that's not something you do unless you're in the middle of cold weather. And so this is something that you can do as it gets colder, as you need to build, but also you want to make sure you're doing that as a day in during the day. You really don't want to encourage drinking milk at night. So no,
okay.
no matter what you put inside of it, it's not going to be a good thing.
So this is something I've always suspected but never had confirmed. So drinking, if you're going to drink golden milk, we're moving into the time where that's going to be helpful
Right.
in general. So whenever I talk about um, seasonal practices, I always, in a general way, I always add all else being equal, right? Because if you're recovering from something very intense, am I right? You might drink golden milk in the summer if your ojas is very depleted by, say, radiation treatment or something super intense. Or is that verboten?
You know, the thing is, if you have radiation treatment, I
Mhm.
find that one thing that you don't want, so radiation treatments and most chemotherapies are extremely heating. The person is burning up inside.
True.
Because all
Yeah.
of the medications are really burning away whatever that they're doing. So people
Mhm.
are really burning inside. We
Yeah.
would not want to be using something with a heating virya during the summer, even if the person, is recuperating. This is not a good recuperation. We could use some other herbs in some other way for recuperation.
So it's not even an all else being equal kind of thing.
Yeah.
It
So if we look at,
there
yes, if we're looking at the ancient texts, they will say that things like ginger, shilajit, turmeric should not be used during the summer. They should not be used during the heat, and it doesn't matter. And it should be avoided by anybody that is already has excess pitta, or has had physical exertions. But pitta is that fire. So even if
Mhm.
you're exposed externally to a fiery medicine, you don't really necessarily want a, a,
More.
a warming, heating thing additional to it. There are plenty of other adaptogens that are cooling that can be actually used. And the entire slew of mushrooms are great for that, you know. So we could have that.
I love that. So always paying attention to the seasonality.
Right.
And then it also sounds like golden milk is a great morning drink.
It is a great morning drink. That would be a better nourishing morning drink, not necessarily a good evening drink.
I think that that's some wisdom laid down that's going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there different oils that you recommend given
Yeah.
this transition?
Oh, absolutely. So during the summer, so Ayurveda is big about Abhyanga, and we actually call it Sneha, which is love, when you're doing the oiling to yourself. And typically you're doing long strokes on long bones and then circular on joints. Now,
Mhm.
during the summer, because it's hot outside, they like to use coconut oil. And so coconut oil is cooling and is very thin. But as we're going now, so it's cooling and thin. So this is actually cold, as you know, it becomes dense in the cold, right? So Ayurveda says this is not good because in the winter, like increases like. So this is going to increase your cold quality, increase your toxicity, increase your heavy dense quality, and we don't really want to do that. So you would want to be using something that is a little bit lighter in terms of being liquid, so, but you also want something that's a little bit more thick. So you might be using a combination of sunflower with sesame oil, or you might want to be using, a sweet almond oil, something a little bit richer than coconut. So we definitely don't want to be using coconut anytime right now or all the way until the end of the spring. That coconut gets put away.
So it's time to change it out. And it's so in tune with seasonal eating, which is also part of an Ayurvedic lifestyle and a seasonal lifestyle. Our bodies have evolved for much longer than we've been having grocery stores
Right.
with these seasonal rhythms. And when we cooperate with them, it can make such a profound difference in how we feel.
Oh, absolutely. I think, there's like, unfortunately, it's hard with our grocery stores to know what is seasonal because there's like everything at all times. But we need to know the qualities. Eventually, we become better at distinguishing what makes us feel better, what makes us feel heavy, what makes us feel light, or what makes us feel good, and what doesn't really agree with us. And we have to have that awareness. And we also have to honor our gut feeling. A lot of people are like not listening to what their body says, but their friend said that they should do this, or somebody else said, or they saw it on TikTok or something that they should be doing this. But that's not for everybody. And we need to be listening to our own intelligence and not negate what is coming up. So that if there is, for example, an intolerance for a specific food because it has, either you have an allergic reaction, or there is like a memory that is
Mm.
associated with that food, we have to honor that. And there's so many other things that we can be eating. We don't need to necessarily force feed things to people. So if somebody has an aversion towards turmeric, well, let's use rosemary. If they don't want to have like the Indian taste in their cuisine, there are plenty of Western spices like oregano and thyme that we can be actually using in their place. So we can actually be using Western spices a little bit more. So if they don't like turmeric, they can try chili. There's like a gamut of jalapenos out there. That's also having a heating quality. They both also thin the blood. They also assist in circulation. So it depends on people's taste, and we don't have to make somebody a convert to some other type of cuisine that might not be in their palate.
I love it. Well, I'm so glad you laid down the wisdom about turmeric. The very first time we met, you mentioned something about the seasonality of turmeric, and I knew I met somebody I wanted to talk to more.
You know,
Uh,
I was actually talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and it's like, when we do something, it's like a deep dive. It's like a deep dive into the information. And then if we're going deep dive into the information, we'll have a lot of aha. So I remember when I was first reading the ancient text, I was like, oh, I'm so happy. I finally have a reason why my gut or why my mind was going in a certain direction. And it's like we do need to learn how to trust. And most likely, if you do trust, you'll find that there was a reason why you were supposed to trust. So it's important to honor the inner wisdom.
Thank you so much for that, because and I think that's one of the reasons for cultivating a home yoga practice,
Right.
is that so many people have fallen out of trust with their bodies. And often it happens at the time when we need that trust the most, right? Someone becomes injured or ill. I've walked through this myself, and you feel let down by your
Mhm.
body. And having a practice already as part of the fabric of your life, where you can sit down and notice where you feel that breach of trust in your body, and listen and move with it, allows those feelings to move through, so that you uncover the deep wisdom that's beneath the surface. And that's a process of learning to discern between gut feeling, intuition, native wisdom in ourselves that we can trust, native as in
Mhm.
part of the self, versus the whims. And I think that's often when people aren't trusting themselves, they're worried that they're following a whim.
Mhm.
And that learning to discern the difference is so important.
Right. So there are two things I want to talk about on that subject. One is we kind of know sometimes you might have that whim, and that whim is an incorrect whim. Okay. And you would know if a whim is a correct whim or an incorrect whim if you have a coating on the tongue. So if you have a coating on the tongue, you do not trust your gut, because your gut is giving you fake information. So if you find that you have a stool that is too smelly, or your tongue is coated, you cannot trust your gut, because your gut is gone haywire and is only going to increase the toxicity. Okay. So you think that you need ice cream and you look at your tongue and it's coated. It's like, no, that's not right. But you think you need ice cream and you pull out your tongue and it's pink or red. It's like, yes, that is a good medicine for you. Okay. So it depends on your level of toxicity. But
Mhm.
then the second piece I wanted to talk about is that there is in the seven systems of philosophy, one of the philosophies says that there are four ways of speaking. And one is that gut feeling that still hasn't been verbalized and still hasn't been processed from the heart. But that is like you have to trust it. So when you have a gut feeling that you don't want to eat something or you don't want to do something, you have to trust it, because if it's hitting you in the gut, that's still unprocessed, but that was accurate. That was a speechless speech. So there's, although we don't hear, but depends on your level. But some people do hear plants or rocks or chairs or environments or whatever. But there's a speechless speech. That you could sit on that rock, or I shouldn't sit on that rock. There's something about that rock, and it's not you don't know why. You don't know if it was sacred to somebody or whatever, but that you shouldn't be sitting on it. That's speech of speech. You need to honor that. Then there's also the speech that is processed by the heart, but just not yet verbalized. So you have a better idea, but you just can't put it into words. And then there's like the speech that is really coming from the throat, where it's like you had the gut feeling processed by the heart, and now you can vocalize why this is happening or why you're feeling this way. And then there's going to be the voice that doesn't really know why it's speaking. And so that is, a speech that is normally going to be really high pitched, and it's going to be just like garbage speech. So, you know, according to Ayurveda, we have a finite amount of prana, a finite amount of ojas. So we don't want to speak irrelevant speech, because you're wasting your prana. And by wasting your prana, you're wasting your ojas, which is deleting your lifespan. So you don't really want to engage in too much irrelevant speech.
Thank you so much. There are so many pearls in what you've just said to help people who have been having a hard time trusting their
Mhm.
bodies. And the context of your own practice is the best way that I know to start to listen and trust again.
Right. And there's also another piece that happens when you develop your own practice. I always recommend, when I was a practitioner, to always do that in the same space, in the same room of the house, in the same, always do it exactly in the same place, not do it today in the bedroom and tomorrow in the library and the next day in the living room and the next day outside. No, in the same place, because as you're doing the practice in the same place, the place starts acquiring the energy of your practice. And even the days that you're not feeling good, the space will pick you up. So although, again, in that gut feeling of like you can't put it to words, there's as we're clearing and as we're working, our auric field and the koshas outside are actually transforming. So now this room has more of that energy of peace and quiet and understanding and clarity. And you can't get that if you're moving around in the house or in the garden. Although it might be nice to do a practice outside, that does not make this place a sacred space. And now you need to be able sometimes to go to that sacred space for clarity, and just, and not even necessarily do asana or pranayama, but just to be able to sit and think, or have awareness. And so having the same place where the person is doing the practice is very important as well.
Thank you for that. So that's going to be the beginning of our home yoga practice tips for today, because that's so very important. On the last interview, we discussed setting up your space, and I encourage people, because I don't want the space to be a barrier at the very beginning. In your first week, tell me if this sounds acceptable to you. You might try different spaces in your home, particularly if you don't have a lot of excess space. You might try the space next to the bed, try the space in front of the couch, find a space that resonates with you and then stick with it. And it doesn't mean that you never like bust a warrior on a hike or something. Of course, we're going to do that. Of course, we're going to do a tree against a tree. And you invest in this space in your home
Mhm,
that sacredness comes from our use, from our rhythms. It's it's a cooperation between us and the outside world, and this is part of how we cooperate.
mhm. You know, there's also going to be this idea. So Ayurveda likes the sister sciences of yoga, but also the sister science of Jyotisha and also Vastu. Vastu is actually about the space in a house. So there's also this idea that you really should not be in the center of the house. So if you would put
Mhm.
diagonals in your house of the corners of the house, you really don't want to be practicing right there. And also, typically, the northeast is going to be more favorable to for your yoga practice. So the
Ah,
northeast, and it can be the northeast of your bedroom, it could be the northeast of the kitchen, it could be the northeast of the living room. Just the northeast side is going to be a little bit more favorable to have a better practice. So, just think. People can also think that way. So if they don't know where to start, see if they can find a northeast area in the house.
oh, thank you for that. That's beautiful.
So
Well, thank you, Sonia, for sharing your expertise and your wisdom with us today. I wanted to let everybody know that you can find Sonia at, and I'm going to spell this out, soniamasocco.com, SONIAMASOCCO.com. And in Albuquerque, you can attend Phytotherapy, her business's open house. And that's where we filmed from last time. It is a magical place full of magical plant energy and people energy. And that open house for the holiday open house is on Friday, December 8th from 4 to 7 p.m. And I will look forward to seeing you and other people there on that festive evening. And I thought we'd leave people with this tip. If you are having trouble motivating from your warm and cozy bed, then yoga to the rescue. You don't even have to get out of bed to start. If you're having that much trouble, find a way to lay on your back with your hands on your low ribs and focus on the rise and fall of your breath. You'll be connecting to one of the roots of your breath in the respiratory diaphragm, and you will be tuning in to a pre-existing rhythm that bridges night to day. And from there, when you feel like sitting up, you might try a warming breath. One of those is called Kapalabhati, and it's driven from deep in the belly. And we focus on a strong, quick exhale, and then letting the inhale take care of itself. And that's such a great training, I find, for the rest of my day, where letting go actively and then accepting and being grateful for what comes in can form a rhythm to my entire day. And although I hate to let go of this interview, I accept what comes next and look forward to maybe us talking again at the next turning of the seasons.
perfect. I look forward to that conversation. Take care and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Sonia. Take care.